quickly, and he was very gracious and stepped back, and he was also very gentle in telling her, hold the handle, not the shaft thing. And after 3 or 4 times of both of us insisting, no, it'll be much easier if you hold it by the handle, and when you go back, it won't come undone. She finally did it and got the feel of it. Once she got the feel of it, she went through and did all 4 corners. And when she was finished and she looked at that frame all screwed together by her, she said, I did it. I can do this. I don't need a man in the house. And it's a good thing, because I don't have a man in the house. And, it's funny. It is funny, and she was using humor in the situation. But humor is always a release of some tension. And I think the tension under that humor, was that she felt incomplete. And she felt that, that she wasn't whole because she didn't have a man in the house. And I think there's a ministry in there that is helping to recognize the wholeness of the person, whatever their circumstance is. And I think the assembly is important, even though once the oven is assembled, the only thing they'll ever disassemble and reassemble is the reflector. But I think it's important to give people an opportunity to see themselves as capable and to experience themselves as the capable people that they are. And so that's, part of, and also the process of assembling the oven. You live in a climate that doesn't insulate your homes. You've probably never seen insulation. So when we explain how the oven works, well, this is an insulated box. What does that mean, that it's insulated? Well, they've handled it, they've seen how tightly it fits in, and as they're putting it in and fitting it so tightly, we're explaining that's so that none of the hot air will escape, that's sealing it in. It really helps them understand how it works, and when you understand how it works, you can work with it better. In our cooking classes, we're not really teaching people how to cook, because they already know how to cook. But what we're teaching them is how to alter their cooking methods for the solar oven. And the things that are most likely to be altered are the amount of water. Very little water escapes from a solar oven. So the amount of water you're going to use for rice is going to be less. Apparently, the Sierra Leonean palate likes wetter rice than the Dominican palate. So we're going to have to play with that recipe. That's why I don't want to publish a book, because we want to adjust our cookbook according to both the dishes and the way they like them cooked for each location. Another business opportunity, Connie was mentioning baking breads and cakes. Another supplemental income opportunity is softening beans. Tell me if this is true in Sierra Leone. In the Dominican Republic, just about every block has a woman who softens beans, and the other women from the neighborhood come and buy a ladle or 2 ladles or however many ladles of beans. So that's another income opportunity for people. And especially if you don't have to pay for the fuel to soften beans, you can either lower your price or increase your profit margin. And do we have this working? Well, I don't know why our video is not showing up, but that's okay. The other thing to talk about was reasons for investment in the oven. We want people to have a sense of ownership. We also want people to only obtain an oven if they have seen and been convinced that it's going to be something of value to them. If they are not convinced that they're going to get whatever the amount that our local partner decided they need to invest, $10 or $20 in local currency, that they're not going to get that value out of it in the first couple of months and then start saving money after that. If they're not convinced of that, they have not understood what the oven can do. So we want to make sure that they've understood that and grasped that and understood. Another thing is, each oven comes with 3 pots, 3 enameled pots, and 3 enameled pots is worth more than $10 or worth more than $20. So we want to make sure that they understand that this oven is worth more to them with all of its components kept together so that they don't buy the oven in order to sell the pots and trash the oven. So I actually in the seminar tell them, these pots work on a stove, yeah, but they're kind of delicate, and the heat of a stovetop or a fire top may cause the enamel to chip, which is true. So I try to kind of hint at, this is not very useful to you. Maybe, I'm just trying to be a little tricky, but but hopefully that discourages people thinking that, because I know that goes through people's minds. I have this pot in hand. This pot is a little bit smaller. Just a moment. So you can see the 2 different size pots. I'm showing you this as one of the many things that demonstrate how we're constantly evolving the program based on feedback. We heard from people, we had originally gotten smaller pots because a smaller quantity will cook faster, but you can make a smaller quantity in a larger pot and it'll cook in about the same amount of time. But we were hearing from people, we want to cook for a larger number of people. We have enough space in here, can't we have a bigger pot? So we increased the pot size. So that's just an example of one of the many ways that we're constantly improving. Another is, in the Dominican Republic, during one of our seminars, when it was time to take the hot pots out of the ovens, the women were grabbing the pots with their skirts and then walking like this to carry the pots because they didn't have anything to grasp the pots with. Well, we're in the Dakotas, and the quilting and sewing that goes on in the Dakotas is like nobody's business. So we created a pot holder pattern, and this is wildly popular with our volunteers. They love to sew these because they're quilting and they have these spare ends from their bolts of cloth that are just perfect for making pot holders. And at the same time, I have found in the Dominican Republic, when we're doing the seminar, we talk about all the benefits, the financial benefits, the environmental benefits, the health benefits of the oven. You won't be inhaling that smoke anymore. All of these benefits. But when I tell them the contents of the oven, and I get to these, and I talk about how all these ladies in the United States, largely in the Dakotas, have heard about, some of the struggles you're facing. And they wanted to send these pot holders as a sign of God's love. It's not happened just once, it's happened repeatedly. That's the point in the seminar when people break out in cheers and applause. So these have become a real sign for people in remote locations that feel forgotten, that God's love reaches all the way here and you're not forgotten. So that's another part of something that's a fairly recent improvement. Another recent improvement is, this is our French bread pan. And you can cook 2 loaves of French bread in here. And our partner in the Dominican Republic, he comes from a town on the shore of the ocean. So his cuisine is largely fish-based. And he looked at this and he said, yeah, you can make a loaf of bread in here, but this is perfect for a fish. So we now tell people it's a bread pan, but you can also put an entire fish that's about this size in foil. And then you lay, whether you're making bread or fish, you lay this black cloth over the top of the bread pan. I've got it facing the wrong way, but you get the idea. Now the reason for the black cloth is you'll notice the pots are mostly black and the cloth is black because the sunlight goes in as light into the oven. And my dad is a retired professor of physics, and I asked him to explain it to me, and I promise you, I was sure that I understood it when he told me. But then now that it's time to repeat it, I only partly remember. But basically he explained to me that when light hits a dark-colored object, the electrons that spin around, they jump out more layers when they, like more levels farther out and release more energy, and that's what converts the light into heat. There was more to it, but basically it had to do with electrons jumping farther out in dark colors. And it converts the light into heat when it hits the dark color. So we want the dark colored cloth over the bread, or over if the fish is in foil, what'll happen, the foil will reflect the light away instead of absorbing it. So we want the dark color to convert it into heat and absorb it. So as you can see, it's an insulated box here on the bottom. And we've got a sticker here on the side of the box and a sticker on the side of the reflector panel. Those stickers line up because although if you just look at this reflector assembled by itself, it doesn't look like it's cut at an angle, it actually is. So when you line these stickers up, you have just the right angle to get the maximum amount of sun possible. There's no sticker on the other side. So that's how you know you've got it set up correctly. These can come apart. You can also store, if you want to take the hook off the other side. You can store the oven. We'll turn it over. Put it. So if you're just going to bring your oven in your house for the night, you can store it like this. But if it's the rainy season and you're going to store it for 6 months, you might want to take it apart and wrap it up and store it. Or if you're going to travel with it. I tell people to wrap it in a sheet if they're going to travel so that it doesn't get scratched. And there's lots of other tricks that we teach and how to clean it and how to take care of it. Let's see. Oh, the other thing that comes with it is this thermometer. And we had one oven owner, Phil and I were just talking about this last night, somebody who, when we checked on them later, they said, oh, I'm not using my oven anymore. Why not? Because the thermometer broke, it doesn't work anymore. And that person thought that the thermometer was the element that heated the oven. So it's really important that we make clear the sun is heating the oven. It doesn't matter if this is broken or whatever, and that the purpose of this is because every day your cooking time is going to be a little bit different because some days the sun is going to be more intense, and it's more factors than just the sunlight. It's the temperature outside, it's the amount of wind, it's the density of the food, how big of a piece or small of a piece you've cut it into. So there's all these factors to take into account. But if you see the temperature is 180, it's going to cook a lot more slowly than if the temperature is, the highest we've measured is 350. And who's to say that's the limit? We may one day measure it at 380, I don't know. But that's just to help gauge. One of the nice things about solar cooking, it's very rare to burn anything.
That cake I have, the zucchini chocolate cake, I forgot about it at home and put it out in the morning and 4 hours later and thinking, oh my God, but it doesn't burn. I mean, it'll, just keep cooking, but it doesn't burn.
Yeah, eggs can burn. And we always say we're gonna hard boil eggs with no water, because you can just put eggs loose on the floor, literally, not even in a pan. Just put them loose in there, and about an hour later, they'll be hard boiled eggs.
There's one other factor in terms of that the black bottom of the oven is important too, because that also absorbs heat that is radiated into the pot.
Yeah, looking at the inside of the oven. This is the bottom that Phil is referring to. It's a black colored piece of metal. Then we have a piece of cardboard as a shock absorber. But also if you look at the interior here, it's all made out of reflective material around the interior, so any sunlight that goes in will be reflected off of the sides and into the pots. So we're constantly trying to reflect towards the pots, and then the pots are black, and then the bottom being black to absorb more heat into the oven.
And the oven will work without the reflector.
Yes.
If the reflector isn't on there, it'll just take a lot longer to cook it, but it will work, and
I've
that's
done
kind of
that.
important.
Yeah.
Because
Yep. Oh, another feature that I didn't explain is we have two lids here. And you can see they have these little bumps around the edges. Those bumps, if we were to turn both of them this way, they would nest in each other, but we don't want to have them. If you think you're looking for a double thickness, but that's not really what you want. You want the bumps to hold one up higher than the other one. The reason being, this is clear plastic so the light can go through 2 layers of it. But by lifting one a little higher than the other, you're creating a thermal pane, just like you have on your winter storm windows. So that the light can still go through, but a lot less of the heat can escape out the top. And people are always surprised, and just about every time we go on a mission trip, there's somebody who is not really convinced that it's going to be that hot, and they open it up and start to stick their hand in, and then they're met with that hot steam. And it's always a surprise to people how hot it is. It's like when you open your oven, if you put your face right in it and that hot air, it's the same way with this.
But you can see the difference with the heat being retained in rather than the charcoal fire where they can get burnt, and you're not going to get burnt on the outside.
And these reflectors in the sun, they look, it's backwards. They look, when they're shining so brightly in the sun, they look like they'd be really, really hot. Can we open it up back on again? They look like they'd be really, really hot. But you can go put your hand on it, and it won't burn you, because the sunlight is not being absorbed, it's just reflecting off. So, although it's very, very bright, it's not hot. The only thing that'll burn you is if you open up and stick your hand inside. That will burn you. If you touch one of these pots, you'll get a blister right out of the oven. So, any further questions?
How do you know if something is done? You can't open everything out and test it and then put it back, you lose a lot of it.
So how do you know when it's done? Each time you open the oven, you're going to lose heat. So we discourage opening just to find out. And that's why we give a recipe book, because we have a basic guideline of approximately how long it'll take. And as you get experience using it, you'll use your thermometer to say, today it's going to be a little longer than normal, today it's going to be a little quicker than normal. But, so it's basically just, am I making bread? That's about bread or cake, that's about 2 hours. Am I making beans? That's about 4 hours. Is the temperature not very good? I'm making beans, I better leave it 5 hours. Is the temperature really hot? My cake is probably going to be ready in 1 hour and 15 minutes. Just based on the conditions of the particular day. And so then you would go ahead and test it based on the combination of the guidelines and your experience. So, and we encourage people to experiment too. So we give them recipes as a guideline, and then we encourage them, don't limit yourself to this. Experiment with lots of new things as well.
Does the humidity affect the ovens?
Humidity affects the oven in the sense that humidity indicates that there's a lot of water particles in the air, and so the sunlight is not going to be as intense because it's going to be dispersed by the droplets of water in the air. So in that regard, yes. Although people feel more hot in humidity, the oven is not going to get quite as hot because the sunlight's not going to be as pure.
Yeah, the demonstrations you give are really important. This is an experience I had in Bonds. Some trainees came to show how to use the things that the United States usually sends, which is CMS, cornmeal, and peanut oil, or whatever. Okay? So she had shown how to make donuts. Yes, no leavening. Chewy hard. But I remembered that. I went to the village of Bongi, and I said to the people, I said, do you get things from the United States? Well, they led me around the corner, and back in the corner of one of the huts was this bag of marked with USA, cornmeal, CMS, and the oil. They weren't using it because they didn't know how. They wanted rice. That was all they wanted. Okay. So I said, we're going to make donuts. But they'll eat anything if it has hot pepper. So I asked the ladies to go get the hot pepper and mix it all up with some water. And so water, cornmeal, and CMS, and then hot oil. And they all ate those donuts. I really liked them because they had hot pepper in them. I'm sure your ladies were adding hot pepper to whatever they were cooking anyway, if you were in a place where they enjoyed that sort of thing. But without training, think of the waste.
That's right.
This is why I said we don't have a recipe book for Sierra Leone yet, because I'm developing the first recipe book for the Navajo, because we went last year and got more of a sense of what they'd like. So for the Navajo, we have mutton stew, we have pizza, we have peach cobbler, just some examples. And actually, I'm really excited. We're going in September to the Navajo Reservation. And our team consists entirely of members of the Rosebud Reservation, the Sioux tribe, the Lakota tribe here in South Dakota. So we're having a Lakota team of missionaries going to the Navajo Reservation. And one of our team members, her father is Lakota, and that's why she lives on the Rosebud Reservation. But her mother is Diné, or Navajo. And so she obtained an oven in June, and she said, I've got some blue corn that my mom sent me. It's Navajo. And she said, I'm going to experiment with it and work on perfecting cooking blue corn in the solar oven so I can teach that when we get there. So we try to make sure that we're making recipes that are culturally appropriate. People do like to learn some foods, like in the Dominican Republic, pizza is not a traditional Dominican food, but they do know and like pizza. So we do include pizza, but for the Dominican Republic, we have rice and beans and chicken, foods and plantains, and they call it yucca. In Africa, it's called cassava. We make the recipes according to where we're going. And since we haven't had enough time in Sierra Leone to develop a repertoire of recipes, I'm gonna wait to make a book until we have recipes, we've tasted them. Like if I give them the recipe we have for rice, they're gonna say this is too dry. So I'm gonna alter the recipe a bit and see if they like it, and then I'll publish it once we know that we've got the water correct for the Sierra Leonean palate. But yeah, if there's ingredients they have that they don't know how to use that are American, that have been donated, we can certainly work with that. We do introduce some foods and do a little bit of cultural exchange, where we introduce some foods that are from here.
You're working with the church, that's great, and I hope this continues. But I should think all of the different science classes where there are especially girls, but guys too, should all include a course in how to use a solar cooker in Sierra Leone,
Like a Harvard
especially
school.
in Freetown area.
Well, I do understand that, our partner, Smart, in Sierra Leone,
Yeah.
that he has shared 20 ovens with the EPA in Sierra Leone so that they can use them in their education outreach.
Good. Wonderful.
Any other? Thank you.